silence fell the moment the pestle struck the ground. The snake did not cry out. It did not coil in pain or lash in anger. It simply stopped moving, its long, patterned body lying still in the dust of a village that had not yet realized it had crossed a boundary drawn long before any living person could remember. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The wind paused. The bird vanished from the air. Even the sun seemed uncertain whether to rise any higher. The woman stood frozen, her hands trembling around the wooden pestle, her breath shallow and uneven. Her eyes were fixed on the lifeless serpent at her feet, confusion and fear battling in her chest. To her, this had been an act of survival, a reflex, a decision made in a heartbeat. She did not know that in this place, some lives were not meant to be defended against. She did not know that the creature lying motionless in the dust was not just a snake. This is WhisperTalex, where ancient voices still speak and every story leaves a mark. Long before this moment, long before fear taught her hand to rise, there existed a village tucked between forest and silence, a place where time walked slowly and memory never truly died. The village was called Akoli, and in Akoli, every breath carried meaning. The elders taught the children that the world was layered, that what the eye could see was only a thin surface stretched over something older and deeper. Trees were not just trees, rivers were not just water, and some creatures were not merely flesh and bone. Among these was the snake of Akoli. It was said the serpent had arrived with the first ancestors, sent not to rule the village but to watch it. It moved freely through compounds and paths, never harming, never hunting, never chased away. To see it was considered a blessing. To harm it was an abomination beyond words. No one in Akoli questioned this, not because they were afraid, but because history had taught them what arrogance could destroy. Chike grew up hearing these stories beneath the iroko tree, his small body pressed against the earth as elders spoke of droughts, sickness, and villages erased from memory for lesser offenses. As a child, he believed them without effort. As a man, distance dulled their sharpness. The city changed Chike. It taught him speed, ambition, and noise. It taught him to believe that progress meant leaving old things behind. And it was there, far from Akoli, that he met Nnedi. Nnedi was not raised on whispered warnings or ancestral laws. She came from a place where danger was immediate and visible, where snakes were killed without ceremony or regret. She was kind, intelligent, and practical. When she loved fully. And when Chike asked her to return with him to his village, she agreed without fear. The villagers noticed her the moment she arrived. They saw her unfamiliar steps, her curious eyes, the way she smiled freely without understanding what silence sometimes meant in Akoli. Some welcomed her, others watched carefully. Outsiders had come before, but none had been brought as a future wife. Chike meant to explain everything. He told her about greetings, about respect, about which paths not to cross. But some truths are difficult to explain when you no longer feel their weight yourself. And so, the most important warning of all remained unspoken. The day unfolded like any other. Nnedi was alone in the compound, sweeping away dust that refused to be chased. The air was thick, the sky undecided between rain and heat. When she turned, she saw movement near the doorway. The snake had entered quietly. It did not rear up, it did not coil in pain or lash in anger. It simply stopped moving, its long, patterned body lying still in the dust of a village that had not yet realized it had crossed a boundary drawn long before any living person could remember. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The wind paused. The birds vanished from the air. Even the sun seemed uncertain whether to rise any higher. The woman stood frozen, her hands trembling around the wooden pestle, her breath shallow and uneven. Her eyes were fixed on the lifeless serpent at her feet, confusion and fear battling in her chest. To her, this had been an act of survival, a reflex, a decision made in a heartbeat. She did not know that in this place, some lives were not meant to be defended against. She did not know that the creature lying motionless in the dust was not just a snake. When Chike returned, the village had already begun to mourn. News in Akoli traveled faster than feet could carry it. By the time the sun leaned westward, the elders were seated in solemn formation. Women wailed in disbelief, and men stood rigid with anger and fear. The snake's body was placed before them, its stillness heavier than its presence had ever been in life. Nnedi did not understand the words spoken around her, but she understood the faces. She understood that something far greater than herself had been broken. Chike fell to his knees before the elders, his voice cracking as he pleaded. He spoke of ignorance, of love, of intention. He swore she had meant no harm, but tradition does not weigh intention the way heart do. It weighs consequence. The chief priest rose slowly, leaning on his staff, his eyes clouded not with anger but with certainty. He spoke of balance, of ancestors who watched closely, of disasters that followed when sacred laws were ignored. He spoke of appeasement. A life must answer a life. Nnedi was to be sacrificed at dawn. Night came heavy and suffocating. Drums beat not in rhythm but in warning. Chike sat beside Nnedi, holding her hands as her body shook. In her eyes lived terror and disbelief, not just of death, but of betrayal by a world she thought she understood. Love does not reason when cornered. Before dawn could claim them, Chike led Nnedi through forest paths remembered from childhood. The village lights faded behind them, flickering like wounded stars. Neither spoke. Some goodbyes are too large for words. When Akoli awoke, the offering was gone. The elders prepared for punishment. Crops would fail, rivers would dry, children would fall ill. The sky would remember the insult. Instead, rain fell. Not a gentle rain, but a generous one. Fields drank deeply. Seeds burst into life. Hunger retreated in confusion. Days passed, then weeks, and still no disaster came. The chief priest entered the shrine alone and emerged changed. He spoke of a vision, of ancestors who looked not at the act, but at the heart behind it. Of mercy granted, not because laws were wrong, but because ignorance is not malice. The gods, he said, had chosen restraint. Some elders accepted this, others did not. Chike returned months later, alone, thinner, quieter. He submitted to cleansing rituals, but Nnedi never returned. Trauma does not obey forgiveness. Some wounds refused to cross the road home. Akoli continued, but not unchanged. Children began to ask questions elders could not silence. Traditions remained, but certainty cracked. The snake of Akoli was gone, yet its lesson endured, that truth must be sought before punishment, and that even gods, it seems, listen more closely than men. This is WhisperTalex, stories whispered in the dark, truths carried by firelight. If this story stirred something in you, follow the whispers. Some stories are not meant to be forgotten.